Dynamic relationship map for auras. This is specifically Anthony, and we're seeing the last 90 days of interactions. On this display, you'll notice different sized particles. The larger the particle, the more total interactions Anthony has had with that individual. You'll also see some color distinction between auras and actual human contacts. So if I remove the human contacts here, you'll see that Anthony has actually interacted with Miles, with Dana, and with Ravi, all being actually auras. If we wanted to do the opposite, we could only display the humans. And there you can see that we have this dynamic interactive relationship map. Now, during an interaction, Anthony may have had multiple humans in the room. For example, if we click on Shiv here, Shiv has a relationship not only with Anthony, but with a lot of other humans. So whenever Shiv has been in a meeting with Anthony, there's been the potential that Kevin, Harper, and some of these others also attended that same meeting. But based on the different sizes of the particles, you'll see that Isaac probably only attended one meeting with Shiv, but he was in that meeting with Shiv, whereas Kevin might have actually been in more meetings than Isaac, obviously, here. You'll also notice that if I click on Isaac, Isaac and Shiv were the only ones that had kind of a dynamic relationship. Whereas if I go back to Kevin, all right, Kevin also participated in meetings with some other individuals, including Shiv. So this is a pretty cool map where we can see when did this individual have a relationship or have an interaction with Anthony that also corresponded to other individuals having that same interaction with Anthony. We display everyone. We can also segment this down into a smaller time window. So let's actually just see the last 30 days. All right, here are all the individuals that we actually have seen interact with Anthony in the last 30 days. Notice now we only have one aura here. So that was Ravi. So this is pretty cool. This supports light and dark mode very dynamically there. So you can just flip that on and off. And then lastly, there is this network versus timeline. So the network is nice because you can see those interconnected relationships. The other thing I'll mention before we look at the timeline view is these kind of pulsating in and out dots. Those are actually coded to have a faster pace for the more frequent interactions and a slower pace for the less frequent interactions. So if we're curious about any given individual, we can actually click on them, double click on them, and it'll pop open their little card. We can see what that person's name is, who they were with, what company, their email address, phone number, last interaction, July 6th, average frequency. They basically meet every 6 days almost, and they've had 6 total interactions. You can lock the position if you wanted to drag and drop these things. So if you want to move them around, you can. That's beneficial for trying to just get a different perspective on the relationship map. And then there's this other interconnected kind of gravity that defines where these different particles end up residing on the display. If you want to just click out, you can close down that pop-up. You could look at the full record if you wanted to. And then here I can just kind of click out. Now our legend and our timeline view will stay static, and I can just flip over to now the timeline view. We'll go back into different displays here. So what we're seeing on this timeline view is actually a kind of timeline map going in this outward spiral. So the further out we get into orbit, that would be the longest duration that it's been since we last interacted with that individual. So those that are in tight, wow, we've had very recent interactions. So if we go to Felix here, this is probably the most recent interaction. Sure enough, they met today, July 6th. We still see that same card, so that's beneficial, that's nice. And then as we get further out, you can see these different day increments. So the last 5 days, we could see here. So that was on July 2nd, and that was just under 5 days ago. get a little bit further out, further out, further out. And because we're on a 30-day view, this is going to be probably within the last 30 days, June 6th, sure enough. And then we can still expand. So you'll see how these different views plot things slightly differently. So you'll see the cluster gets a little bit thicker as we go with a wider date range. Some of these very far out. So if we look here, Dimitri, last time they interacted, January 10th, the beginning of this year. This bar is also something that you can toggle in and out. So if we want to get an even tighter window, that'll spread these plots out a little bit further to be able to get a little bit better visualization. So pretty cool functionality that we got here.